Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second of our four statewide virtual policy institutes. My name is Stacy Morgan, and I am the Executive Director of the Mental Health Transformation Alliance. We welcome everybody here this fine Tuesday morning. We want to open up and say thank you to the team at Language Service Solutions for being here today and providing our interpretation services. I'm going to turn it over to them briefly to explain to us how we access those services should they be needed.
Muy buenos días y bienvenidas y bienvenidos a todos. Los organizadores de este evento están con la firme determinación de facilitar la comunicación multilingüe, bilingüe en el día de hoy durante la reunión de hoy. Mi nombre es Murtado y mi cointérprete es Angelina y estamos representando a Language Service Solutions. Estaremos ofreciendo interpretación simultánea de inglés a español y de español a inglés. Good morning and welcome everyone. The organizers of this event are firmly committed to facilitating bilingual communication in today's meeting. My name is Murtado and my co-interpreter is Angie, and we are representing Language Service Solutions. We'll be providing interpretation from English to Spanish and Spanish into English. Si usted quiere escuchar y participar en español, seleccione su canal de idioma haciendo clic abajo a la derecha de su pantalla de Zoom, en el globito si usa una computadora o en los tres puntitos si está conectándose a través de su teléfono inteligente. Seleccione interpretación, luego español y luego haga un clic en terminado. Cuando regrese de los grupos pequeños, si hay grupos pequeños, vuelva a repetir este proceso. If there will be Spanish speakers today and you want to interpretation into English, select your language channel by going to the bottom right-hand corner of your Zoom screen. Click on the globe if you're using a computer or the three dots if you are connected by phone. Select interpretation, then English, and then click done at the end. A few guidelines for creating multilingual spaces, algunas pautas para crear un espacio multilingüe. Yo estoy hablando rápido porque estoy dando la instrucción en ambos idiomas, pero ustedes por favor no hagan lo mismo. I am speaking fast because I'm doing this introduction in both languages, but you will please do not do the same thing. Lastly, we remind you to please speak one at a time with one language per sentence and only speak in the language of the channel you chose. If you are bilingual, Spanish and English, you do not need to choose a channel. Por último, les vamos a recordar que por favor hablen una persona a la vez en un idioma por oración y solo hablen el idioma que usted eligió. Si usted es bilingüe, español-inglés, no necesita escoger un canal. In a little bit, I will post the same instructions in the chat so that you can have them. En un momentico voy a poner estas mismas instrucciones en el chat para que usted la tenga a la mano. Back to you, Stacy, and thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you again for providing this service today. And as he said, please, to our presenters, please speak slowly and allow some pauses, and this will help our interpreters greatly as they try to provide this service for everyone. We also have closed captioning today. For closed captioning, click the CC icon and select Show Subtitle. To turn closed captioning off, click on the CC again and then Hide Subtitle. Today we'll be focusing on advocacy on the local level. You'll hear from some wonderful speakers and get to take a deep dive on effective ways to influence policy through local level advocacy. Local policy decisions can have major impacts in people's day-to-day lives. In this institute, we will focus on what decisions are made at that local level, how local governments function, and the tools and skills used by advocates to advance policies that support children, youth, and families on that local level. The goal of this institute is to educate and build skills for local level advocates and grassroots champions in the local policy process. You will hear from a variety of speakers and panelists to learn about the important advocacy work that can happen on a local level through their experience of what they have done. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We want to thank you for logging on to join us today. You can type any questions you might have in the chat or our question and answer box, and we'll do our best to make sure that they are answered. PCANC's communication manager, Chris, will be live tweeting this event, so make sure you check that out at PCANC and use the hashtag North NC Policy Institute 2021. That's hashtag NC Policy Institute 2021. And additionally, we are recording today's institute, and this recording will be shared afterwards. We want to thank our sponsors for this event, WellCare and Essentials for Childhood. Without their support, this event would not have been possible. We would also like to thank the State Collaborative Planning Group for all their hard work to make this event happen. This is the second of our 4 policy institutes hosted by PCANC and the North Carolina Collaborative for Children, Youth, and Families. The next one will be next week on October 5th, and it will focus on advocacy on the state level. You'll want to register for the remaining 2 institutes. We will be putting the registration links in the chat, so keep your eye out. And if you register for one, you still have to register for the other. It won't automatically register you. If you register for October 5th, you won't be in the last one. So make sure you register for both. Today, we'll hear from many dynamic and engaging speakers. We'll start off with a special welcome message from Dr. Charlene Wong, followed by an opening keynote from Reverend Dr. Clifford Barnett Sr., and an Advocacy 201 by Elaine Zuckerman. We will then take a short break and return for our 2 youth keynotes delivered by Angela Kasanyoka and Prithia Rutnam. And lastly, a panel discussion with Kristen Dunn, Pilar Rocha Goldberg, and Crystal Kelly. So let's dive right in. First, we would like to share this special welcome video from Dr. Charlene Wong, Assistant Secretary for Children and Families at the Department of Health and Human Services.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Charlene Wong, the Assistant Secretary for Children and Families at the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. I am thrilled to be welcoming you today to this North Carolina statewide virtual policy institute. The power of communities to advocate for and drive policies that support the health and well-being of children and their families cannot be understated, particularly during this ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. At the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, we continue to work towards achieving our vision of children who are healthy and thriving in safe, stable, and nurturing families, schools, and communities. With that vision in mind, the department is launching a new division of child and family well-being that will work to meet the health, social, and educational needs of children, youth, and their families in North Carolina. We'll be working to achieve that by enhancing how children and their families can access programs that support their well-being. We know that coordination across programs in the mental, social, and health spaces can give more families access to these programs that they really need. An early area of work will be making it easier for children and families to access and utilize the nutrition support programs, for example, WIC and SNAP. The division will also be working to coordinate increased investments in child and family well-being. An example of early work here will be thinking through the use of the American Rescue Plan funds and how these funds can be used to close key equity gaps in child well-being, including more equitable access to the continuum of mental health services for children and youth. Finally, the division will be elevating the values of the teams and partners all across the state who are working to support child and family well-being. We're working to create a thriving culture in the division, as well as with partners, to really celebrate the positive impact that we're having on child and family well-being. To elevate and coordinate the critical work of supporting whole child and family health, the Division of Child and Family Well-Being will bring together complementary programs from within the department that serve children and families. These programs include nutrition programs for children, families, and seniors, such as WIC, SNAP, and then a child and adult care food program, the Early Intervention Infant Toddler program, health-related services and programs for children, such as school health promotion, home visiting, and programs for children and youth with special health care needs, and school and community mental health services for children and youth. We expect the Division of Child and Family Well-Being to launch starting in the winter. During the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we've learned that we can make a greater impact when we collaborate across teams and with communities to improve access to our programs and services. We are proud of how we at the department, and with so many partners across North Carolina, including all of you here today, have transformed how we work together as a team to serve children and families during this unprecedented global crisis. Thank you so much to the organizers of this virtual institute for creating a space for us to connect and to build and strengthen the skills that we all need to advocate for children, youth, and their families. These collective efforts will allow us to make that positive impact for children and families that we're all looking for by ensuring that the programs and services are available and reach those who need them the most. Thank you and enjoy the Institute.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. Now we would like to transition to our opening keynote address delivered by Reverend Dr. Clifford Barnett, the pastor for Warner Temple AME Zion and Wilmington City Council member. Dr. Reverend
Right.
Clifford Barnett,
Amen.
the floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. And welcome to all of those who are on the line. And thank you for this opportunity to share at this second virtual statewide policy and institute on advocacy that affects children, youth, and families on the local level. First of all, as a member of the city council, you need to understand that the local level doesn't get any localer than the city council. The city council is where laws are made, rules, and we deal with budgets, we deal with housing, we deal with infrastructure, we deal with streets, we deal with what can be built, what can't be built. We deal with programs that affect the lives of children and families. And so it's really important, because I want to talk just for a few moments about some skills and some strategies that we could use to advance policies that affect children, youth, and families from the local level. Okay. First of all, I want to share the skill or the strategy of meeting your city councilman in their home, meeting your city councilman where you live. See, one of the neat things about being a member of the city council is that you live in the communities that you serve. So you will see your city councilman in the grocery store. You'll see him at a picnic. You'll see him at an event, because we're right here. We don't travel back and forth to Richmond or travel back and forth to Raleigh, I apologize, or back and forth to Washington, D.C., as some of the others do. So a great opportunity is to meet your city councilman where you see him: ballpark, grocery stores, even catch us in the church. And then when you catch us in the church or catch us in the ballpark, tell us what you're interested in. Offer us something in writing. Tell us the things that are concerning you. That's one way to help advance advocacy that affects children, families, and youth. Another strategy that I've learned that works really well is speak before the city council. In Wilmington, we have an opportunity for citizens to come and give public comments. They get 5 minutes, and you can speak about anything that is of interest to you. One of the challenges that we have is that we very seldom have people who want to say something. So I would challenge you to speak before city council. Come out, and then the other thing is when you come to city council, bring people with you. Wear different colored shirts, red shirts, yellow shirts, blue shirts, orange shirts, a pink beret in your hair, beret in your hair, whatever the case might be, but come and prepare to speak before city council, because believe it or not, we listen. Another thing that we could do, another strategy, is that we could write letters, send emails, text messages. Oh, and this crazy thing, I know it's an old fashioned, but it really works. Call on the phone. You could literally just call us. If you go to the city council website, there's always a number where we could be reached. Call us. Even things like, let's go out to lunch. Let's have coffee. Let's sit down and talk for a few moments. Because what you'll find is that we do listen, and we want to hear what our citizens are saying, especially because we want to build policies. We want to build laws that affect children's lives, not just now, but in the future to come. Another thing that I think we ought to do is work on strategies and skills to advance policies that affect children, youth, and families from a local level is we've got to keep at it. You got to keep at it. You can't stop. You can't quit because you get a no. You can't quit because it gets tough. I've got a son who did 390 burpees in 45 minutes wearing a mask. Okay. And he uses this philosophy. He says, Dad, whenever I get a no, that no means I'm one step closer to my yes. So I want to challenge each of us as we work on policies, as we work on being an advocate for youth, children, and families from the local level. I want to challenge each of us to not give up, to keep at it, to keep going. When you get a no, that no means I'm just one step closer to my yes. Another skill and strategy that I think that works on the local level is you've got to volunteer. We need volunteers. We need people who serve on committees. Every city council has a number of committees that we look for people to serve on. Committees on housing, committees on environment, committees on infrastructure, committees on parks and recreation. We've got hundreds of committees, and we're always looking for individuals to volunteer to work. You can work at your local school. You can do some things. One of the things that I do every morning at DC Virgo is I meet with the kids and I pass out masks. I open the car door for the kids every morning from 7:15 to 8:15 at DC Virgo Middle School. As a matter of fact, it's so crazy that the kids will literally sit in the car and they'll wait for me to open the door. One time I said to a parent, does the door open from the other side? But listen, here's the challenge. When you volunteer, you've got to be consistent. Our kids, our families do not need another disappointment. They do not need a person who says, I'm going to show up, and then you don't show up. So in order to advance policies, in order to be an advocate, in order to build policies that affect the lives of children, youth, and families from the local level, one strategy is to volunteer. Take a moment and think about what can you do in your neighborhood? What can you do in your community? Now, as you volunteer, don't put your family second. Okay, you still got to take care of your family, you still got to take care of home. But I challenge you to find something that you can do, something that gets you up in the morning. We call it the why. So when you go to bed, if you've got a why, if you've got a while I'm getting up, if I've got an assignment that I'm going to do, if I know why I'm getting up in the morning, I'll fulfill that assignment. So I challenge you to be a volunteer, to volunteer. Another thing that we need to know is that someone mentioned earlier about collaborating. We've got to work with each other. I challenge you to work with communities and other organizations throughout our community in order that we could become better advocates for our children and families. Work with each other. And I'll use this illustration. I believe that all of us have what I call gifts. If you look at your hand for a moment and just look at your fingers and just kind of say to yourself, yep, I've got gifts. There's certain things that I can do. There's certain things that I'm able to do. For example, I'm able to meet at a school and open the door for kids. That's a gift. I'm able to speak. That's a gift. I'm able to do. There are things I can do because I have gifts. Now, put in the chat for me. We all have gifts, right? We all have gifts. We all have gifts. But also, what I believe is that each of us, although we have gifts, we also have gaps. See, look in between your fingers. There are gaps. There are certain things I can't do. Like, for example, I'm not really good at being an organized person. You mean like keeping my desk straight, stuff like that. Man, I can't do that. That's a challenge for me. So each of us have gifts and we have gaps. As we work on becoming advocates for our children and our youth and our families, what I want to challenge you to do is I want to challenge you. And if you had somebody in your room, I'd ask you to give that person a high five. But let's pretend this is that person with your other left hand. And what I want you to do is take your gifts and fill in your neighbor's gaps. You see? Your gifts fill in your neighbor's gaps. And so when we work together, filling in gifts and gaps, then we can become better advocates for those who need our services most. So again, wrapping up, some strategies and some skills at strengthening or building advocacy for children and families at a local level is number one, meet your councilmen where they are. Meet them at home, meet them in the park lot, meet them at the barbecues. Speak before city council. Take the opportunity to bring your issue before city council. Take that opportunity to bring people with you as you do. Another is to keep at it. Don't give up. Please don't quit. Remember, your no is one step closer to your yes. That's all. That's what it is. And you can't give up. The other thing is you've got to get involved. We need people to actively get involved. Do what you can do. Use your gifts. Use your gifts to fill in those gaps. Do what you can do. Volunteer. Be consistent. If I want you to take anything away from this address, it's number one, our kids do not need another disappointment. They don't need another letdown. If you say you're going to show up on Tuesdays, show up on Tuesdays because they look for you. And remember, we oftentimes say, because all it takes is one caring adult, just one caring adult, and you can affect the lives of children and families. So we want to do that. And then lastly, we want to work together. We've got to work with each other. We've got to continue to work side by side and work with each other. I don't know how to say it, but somehow it seems to me, maybe we're stationed where God wanted us to be. That the little place you're filling is the reason for your birth. And just to do the things you do, He put you on this earth. If God had wanted otherwise, I guess He would have made you just a little different of a less or better grade. But come to the conclusion when the envying is stilled that the post to which He sent you is the post He wanted filled. And sometimes you may get the struggle and your labors, you review that you'd like a higher task with greater things to do. But come to the conclusion when the envying is stilled that the post to which He sent you is the post He wanted filled. So as you strive along in your struggles, in the hopes when day is due, was it really necessary to the things God wants to do? For there isn't any service you can give which you should scorn, for it might be just the reason God allowed you to be born. Go, take these skills and strategies and use them to advocate for policies that affect the lives of children, youth, and families on the local level. Thank you for this time.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Barnett Sr. Those amazing tips and amazing words. So thank you so much. There, if you have a chance and you can stay around, there's a lot of comments in the chat regards to thank you, how awesome that was, how true some of the words that you said and presented to them today was. So take time to read the chat. There's some amazing stuff in there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Now I'm going to turn it over to Elaine Zuckerman, Advocacy and Communications Director at the North Carolina Early Education Coalition, for an Advocacy 201 presentation. Elaine, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Stacey. I don't know what I was thinking when I agreed to follow that address.
Right.
Thank you so much, Reverend. That was just the gifts and gaps metaphor is going to stay with me for a while. So I appreciate that good reminder this morning. I'm going to share my screen here and just go ahead and get started. So welcome to Advocacy 201. So we're going to talk about local advocacy for children and families. So my name is Elaine Zuckerman. I'm the Advocacy and Communications Director with the North Carolina Early Education Coalition. This picture here is obviously not me. This is my little guy, my son Elliot, who is 2 and no longer this tiny baby. But I like to include this just so you all know. I have a very young child. You know, we are working parents. My child is in childcare, so we are living a lot of these issues that we're here to talk about today. So what I want to do is just kind of provide an overview of local government, why local advocacy matters. We're going to talk about some advocacy basics. We can all use a refresher. We're going to offer some tips and tools to help you become an effective advocate. I'm going to talk about some examples of successful local advocacy campaigns in North Carolina. And then I'm going to give you some ways that you can help and take action right away. So let's see. Before we dive in, just to give you a really quick overview of who we are at the Early Education Coalition and sort of what we do. We're the only statewide advocacy organization dedicated to high quality early education. So we were founded in 1990 as a membership organization, and we do our work in a number of different ways, but the heart of it is really developing policies to benefit young children and families, and then working with advocates, policymakers, nonprofit partners and organizations, and a full-time lobbying team to help make those changes happen. And since 2018, we've also been the backbone organization for the Think Babies North Carolina Alliance, which is more the hat that I'm wearing here today. So Think Babies NC is a movement to build public awareness and policymaker support at all levels for babies and their families. And we do this with an intentional focus on communities of color who face the greatest systemic barriers to accessing opportunities. And we focus our work on what we know all children need to thrive: healthy beginnings, supportive families, and high quality early care and learning experiences. Because we know when we think babies, we create stronger families, vibrant communities, and a prosperous future for everyone in our state. So the Think Babies NC Alliance is led by a cross-sector leadership team of public and private early childhood organizations at the local level and at the state level. And it's funded by, in part by 2 national organizations, 0 to 3 and the Pritzker Children's Initiative. So with that background, what we want to talk about today is why local government matters. And I'm going to start by talking about why you should care about public policy. And I hope you already do. And I assume that since you're here this morning, you do. But if you haven't really thought about it before, here are a few reasons why you should care. Public policy affects our daily lives in so many ways that we don't even really think about as we go about our lives. The roads we drive on, the air we breathe, the health and safety of our food. I mean, every single thing. And just to zero in a little bit, you know, public policy impacts every aspect of children's development and health and family support and early learning. So just a few examples specifically around just childcare, early education. Policies define which programs families are eligible for based on their income. Policy sets the funding levels for key programs. It can create programs. It's sometimes, public policy is like the nitty gritty details, right? The laws and rules that define what is childcare, how is it regulated? So these are all things that are determined by public policy at some level of government. And oftentimes it's a combination of federal, state, and local policy and funding. So public policy is influenced and developed by many different things, many different people. I know sometimes, you hear a lot about it, so who has the money and the power? And I think that's a pretty cynical way to look at things, because if you look at this list, we know that there are a lot of factors and influencers on public policy. So starting first and foremost with citizens and advocates, like all of us here, professional experts and practitioners play a role. Lobbyists and advocacy organizations like mine. Policy is typically based on research and data, but sometimes even determining which data and research to use is determined by policies. Frequently, policy is based on how much funding is available at the federal, state, or local level. And then, of course, policy is made by policymakers. And this can be everybody from your city council to your school board members, to the Child Care Commission or the governor or state legislators, Congress, and all the way up to the president. So all of these different people and all of these factors go into creating public policy, which is exciting because it means there's so many different opportunities for advocates to influence it. So let's dive a little bit deeper into local government, sort of the who, what, and how of who represents us locally. So when we talk about local policymakers, we primarily mean the people at the county or the city or town level who you vote to elect. So, the mayor, your city council members, your county commissioners, school board members, but local government is also made up of a lot of different departments, committees, task forces, special commissions. So there are a lot of different people involved in keeping your local area running smoothly. And any of them could be your road in to talk about the issue that matters most to you. So moving to the what, and I saw there was a question, I think, in the Q&A about this, but here are just a few things that tend to be within the scope of local government. Local budgets. Your city or county all has a local budget. Education policy, often dictated by the school board. The police and fire protection, zoning, your water supply, sewage, sanitation, transportation, social services, and public health, and parks and rec, and things like that. So, while a lot of these things have a federal or a state funding component, a lot of the day-to-day policies and additional funding is really determined at the local level. So there's a lot of opportunity for influence in the community where you live. So how do local governments do this work? Well, first of all, the important thing to know before you get started here is that in North Carolina, counties and municipalities are granted power and authority by state statutes in the state constitution. So then, in addition to federal and state funding that local governments receive, they also have the authority to change property tax or local sales tax to increase revenue. They can initiate local referendums, different initiatives, or other ballot measures that are all locally based. And then, of course, they rely on, fees for service in order to maintain things like water, sewer, transportation services. So this flexibility means that from one county to the neighboring county, you could have a different tax rate, a different level of revenue, a different number of services. So there's so much flexibility at the local level to really give your input on what matters and how you want those funds to be spent. So local governments are in charge of a lot, but again, they have a lot of discretion to really create and change policies that impact their residents. And this is why local advocacy is so important. As the Reverend mentioned earlier, your local elected officials are the closest and most accessible to you. They live in your community. They might be your neighbors. You might see them at Target, getting gas at the gas station. So, they often act as our first line of government when you want something to change. And so they're the most accessible part of government to the average citizen. You can attend a city council meeting and give a public comment a whole lot easier than you can just show up at Congress and give a public testimony. It's not how that works. So just the opportunity to make your voice heard and connect directly with policymakers at the local level, it's so much easier than at any other level of government. That connection is sort of the tangible nature of local advocacy that we sometimes don't get to feel with state and federal advocacy. You can get involved, you can participate directly, and you can see the changes quickly in your community. Local politics and issues also frequently set the precedent for what happens at the state and national level. We've seen this a lot in North Carolina alone, and we're going to talk about some examples later on. But another benefit to pursuing local advocacy is that it's usually a lot easier to get people on your team, either for or against an issue. If you're upset about something in your community, chances are you're not the only one, because you share that space with your friends and your neighbors. If your streets are full of potholes, you're not the only one who's bothered by it, right? So like, politics is local. That's what that phrase means. So you start there. So it's really easy to rally support. And as I mentioned, local government is sort of that first line, which means it's also the easiest and quickest place to make changes happen. So when it comes to local advocacy, quick response and direct impact are usually the rule. And finally, let's embrace this cliched phrase, but, think globally, act locally. And what I mean by that in this instance is that even though local change may take a while to trickle up to the state or federal government, we create so many possibilities when we take a stand locally, and that really creates a ripple effect. Local issues and local changes bring that, it gets attention from the public at large. So that creates awareness and more conversation around the topic that then leads to change at a bigger level. So what I'm going to go into now is just sort of a refresher on some basics about advocacy and why you should be an advocate, so that we can then go in to talk about a few more strategies. But just so we're all on the same page, the simplest definition of advocacy is taking action to defend or promote a cause. What this looks like can take many different forms, but it's showing public support for or against something. It's standing up for what you believe. It's also about education. And by that, I mean educating the public or educating the media or educating policymakers about the things that you're passionate about. Part of advocacy is simply sharing information and resources about what you know is important. Again, that's that education piece. And as we often say, advocacy is a team sport. There's power in numbers. None of us should go about this alone. One person emailing a policymaker is great, absolutely better than nothing. But if you get 100 or 500 or 1,000 people sending emails, that's going to demand someone's attention a whole lot more than just one person. And again, advocacy is active. That's the simplest definition because it starts with taking action. It's one thing to support a policy, but advocacy means really taking that next step to do something about it. So that's what advocacy is. But let's also talk about what it's not. Advocacy is not direct service. I'm sure there are a lot of people here from nonprofits and community organizations. If your job involves serving a family or a child in some way, that's service or case advocacy, but that's not advocacy in the way that we're talking about it today. Advocacy is not the same as support or advice to a friend or a colleague. Supporting these issues is the best first step, but taking that next step to advocacy really requires taking. And advocacy is not always about confrontation or conflict. I think sometimes we tend to think about protests and marches and things like that, which is important and a necessary piece of this. But usually conflict is a not the best place to start in your advocacy efforts. So it doesn't always have to be confrontational. So now that we know a little bit more sort of our baseline definition of what advocacy is, I want to talk about why you should be an advocate. And that's because advocacy is not a spectator sport. I assume since you're here today that you want to be involved and make change happen. And that means you have to get involved in the policymaking process at every level. That action is what advocacy is all about. But sadly, most people are not engaged at all, but especially at the local level, it tends to get ignored. So most of our country's conversation around politics is pretty limited to national issues, sometimes state issues. But either way, it's usually centered around elections, things that happen every 2 to 4 years. But we know that policy is happening every single day. So, not only is the conversation limited to national issues, but research shows really minimal engagement even with local elections. But too many issues are caught up in gridlock, either in Raleigh or in Washington. As we've already talked about, we really have an opportunity to be effective at the local level, and that change can then trickle up. So, our goal and our responsibility as early childhood advocates is to improve the lives of children and families and the systems that serve them. And public officials really depend on us to carry out their responsibilities. So they not only require, but welcome the advice from well-informed people like all of you. And when you put together that desire for change and action of advocates and policymakers and their responsibilities, that's when you can really make change happen. So I'm going to talk now about how everybody here can be a big voice for children and families and offer some tips, tools, and resources. It has never been more important to make children and families our top priority. As we all know, children and families are facing huge challenges due to COVID. Young children need you to be their champion always, but especially now. It's really up to all of us to make sure that our youngest citizens have what they need for a strong foundation for future success, not one that's undermined by the effects of this pandemic. And you as advocates have the power to make that happen. And that's because elected officials at all levels want to hear from their constituents. They want to represent best interests of their districts. And this is, I think, especially true at the local level. But most policymakers don't have a background in things like childcare, family support, child health. So your job as advocates is to help policymakers understand the issues. Just as you might tell a local elected official specifically where there's a pothole that needs to be fixed on a road that you drive on every day, help them understand the specific problem that's happening in your childcare center or in your home visiting program or anything that you're dealing with every day, to tell them what's happening on the ground in your community. And I think the most important thing to remember is that you can't assume that they know. I think sometimes those of us who do this work, we're so deep in it that we forget that not everybody knows the ins and outs of why this is so important. They don't know our acronyms, that's for sure. So we can't assume that they know unless we are telling them, because they probably don't. There are a lot of really important competing priorities that policymakers are having to think about every day. And so our job is to make sure that the issues facing children and families are the top priorities so that we can inspire them to invest in children and families. So how do we do this? What persuades policymakers? Here are a few different things that can be helpful in convincing policymakers to take action. The more of these things you have, the better. Starting with urgent need, which I think we all have that one covered thanks to COVID. There has never been a more urgent need than what we're facing right now for children and families. Accurate facts also help to back up this need. So we want to make sure that we have the data and facts that we need to back up what we're saying. Effective solutions. This is important because even if policymakers agree with your general premise. They understand. They may not know how to connect the dots. So that's your opportunity to tell them what you want to happen. Other policymakers can be really important. Sometimes another policymaker who has some more power can be really influential. No one wants to stand on their own on an issue, so it can be helpful to make sure that you're targeting everybody who can make an impact. Local support, again, make sure that you're also not going at this alone. You want to make sure that you can show a lot of local support for what you're fighting for. Traditional and media coverage is really important. And this is because it's public. Everyone can see it. It's also a really good way to interact directly with policymakers these days on social media. So keep that in mind. Sometimes there's a legal requirement and they may have no choice. So a good example of this is the almost 30-year-old Leandro court case, which says that every child in North Carolina has a constitutional right to a sound basic education, and the state is failing to provide this. I'm going to talk about this more a little bit later on, but just that's a good example of sometimes there's a legal requirement. And then finally, and probably most importantly, compelling real stories and messages from their constituents. This is why it is so important stories about your own work and the children and families in your community. So that's what we're going to really spend some time on here. So first things first, what makes a story? The first thing to do is to think about what you want your audience to know, think, do, or feel. Whether you're just trying to raise awareness of an issue, or if you're trying to take the next step and get someone to take a specific action, your goal should help determine the tone of your story. And the best stories combine logic and emotion. It's so important, especially for advocacy purposes, to include key facts, some data or local examples to back up what you're saying. But it's just as important that every story has that emotional pull too. Facts and research are, but nobody ever marched in downtown Raleigh because of a really cool pie chart. We understand the world through stories. So it's really important to tie all those pieces together when you're speaking to policymakers. So a good story should reflect who you are. Let your personality shine through and be authentic. It doesn't have to sound like one thing, like a professional, what you have in your mind. It should be you. And finally, remember, it does not have to be perfect. It just has to be personal. So I could give you tons of well-written, highly researched talking points about childcare or paid leave, tons of other issues, but I think hearing about them from people who've experienced them firsthand is so much more powerful. So I'm going to play a couple of examples of videos with really compelling stories. The first is a clip that we produced with some professional videographers, which I'm sure you'll be able to tell is different than if I did it. And that one's about childcare subsidy. And then I'm going to play a clip that we recorded on Zoom, just to show you anybody can do this. And so that one is, or the first one is more about education and awareness and really, digging into that personal story. And the other has elements of that, but it also has a really clear and very specific policy ask. And so both of these have a role in that advocacy space. So bear with me as I attempt to share videos.
I'm Tanaka Edie. I've been working at my center for 23 years. I love being an infant teacher. I always say that the first year is the most promising year of a child and the most important year of a child, because that's when they're learning so much and their brain is like a sponge where they're taking in all these social skills, the language skills, the cognitive skills that they're all learning, just to be able to be there with other children and treat them as if they're my own kids and know that I'm helping them to.
Sorry, I'm seeing messages that you guys can't see. So let me try this again.
Yeah, Elaine, right now it was just a black, we could hear it, but it was just the black box on the screen.
Okay, let me try one thing. Sorry. Don't we all just love technology?
Oh, yes. It is okay.
Let's see. Can you all
Oh,
see now?
I can see her now. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll try
Thank
this.
you.
Take two.
I'm Tanaka Edie. I've been working at my center for 23 years. I love being an infant teacher. I always say that the first year is the most promising year of a child and the most important year of a child, because that's when they're learning so much and their brain is like a sponge where they're taking in all these social skills, the language skills, the cognitive skills that they're all learning, just to be able to be there with other children and treat them as if they're my own kids, and know that I'm helping them to be the most wonderful adults when they go out into the world, because they have that nurturing and love their first year being there with me as a teacher. Even though I've been there 23 years, there are people at Target that makes way more money than me. So, and I would think, like, as a teacher, we would get, paid a little bit more because we're teaching the kids, and there's a lot that we're balancing our work life and our home life. Like, before even getting wages, like my husband and I, we almost had our lights turned off. We didn't know where we would get like money, for food and stuff. And luckily we had family. I mean, we've been evicted a couple of times. No one at the center ever knew what we went through. I mean, that just shows how much we needed the financial help, and we couldn't get it at the time. But now, having wages as a supplement, that extra money that I'm getting every 6 months, it is a great deal of help. And it does help me want to stay, because having that extra money and being able to go to work every day, so I don't have to worry about gas in the car, or if I want to go get myself something to eat, I can just do that. Or if I want to just go do something extra, I'm to do that and not worry about not having any money. You can go work somewhere else and get paid more, but the amount of work that we do, the blood, the sweat and tears that we do for the children and for the families, we feel like we do deserve to be paid what we're worth.
Okay, so that was the first one. That one had a really clear policy ask to expand the child care wages program. And now I'm going to play one that was a bit more geared towards sort of just raising awareness and some public awareness efforts. If I can do this one correctly, let's see.
Everybody just needs an equal chance, with childcare. And the ones having to go through a struggle like me, who sometimes may have been worse than I am, who can't have childcare, I think that, I get emotional thinking about it. Because of my Head Start families, I think about, some that are homeless and they can't, make it. They don't have transportation. It just gets emotional at times, and all they're trying to do is get their children education and have them somewhere to play, because they can't go outside, or little things like that. I think that everybody needs an equal chance, and my struggle, I've been trying to mask it. It was a struggle. I don't know how we would make it without our subsidy. I really don't. It just makes a difference, having childcare and just being able to be comfortable.
All right, so as you can see, they're both incredible stories, incredible storytellers. And you don't have to have, professional videographers. We were able to do that with some funding we had. But this, the first one I played, we recorded that on Zoom. So anybody can do this work. And I'm going to get back to my slides here, hopefully, but don't worry, the links for the videos are in the slides, which I know they will share out after this. So you will have a chance to see them and watch them again if you'd like. Right there. So once you have a story and you're ready to share, it needs to go any and everywhere. You have probably heard this before, but people need to hear something 7 times on average before they remember it. And on the right here, you'll see some other stats about messaging. We are inundated with messages every day, about 3,000 of them. Out of that huge number, people only really pay attention to about 50. Then out of that, only about half are actually consumed. And then after you weed out what you don't like, people are really only remembering about four messages out of 3,000 that they heard that day. So that means that it is hard to break through. And so you have to make your message one that's going to be remembered and shared. And that means taking a surround sound approach so that you can get your message out in as many places as possible. So what this means with the surround sound approach is to think about all of the different ways that you can connect with policymakers and your own network. So here are just a few ideas of things that you can do, actions you can take, and ways to share your story and your messages. Meet with your policymakers. So this means one-on-one meetings, group meetings, showing up at the city council meeting and speaking. You can also email or call, as we were reminded earlier, that old-fashioned notion that you can call. Policymakers get a ton of emails every day. So sometimes a phone call is the best way to get their attention. You can also start or distribute a petition about something you care about. This has been really effective at the local level, especially. And if you're someone who always signs a petition when it comes in your email inbox, that's great. I encourage you to take the next step and share it. Share it with 5 friends, 10 friends, put it on your own social media. So just keep thinking about ways that you can amplify what is already being said and get your message out there. If you like to write a letter to the editor or an op-ed for your local newspaper. It is not as hard as it may seem if you've never done it. And we've got some tools, and I know other organizations do a lot of this work too, just to help get those personal stories out into the media. So again, these are just a few ideas, but this crisis that we're in because of COVID is big. So we all have to think bigger and really do more than what we've always done. I'm going to move into now just some examples of local advocacy that's happened in North Carolina. And first, I want to talk about some really amazing work that's been done around paid family leave. So just as some quick background on the issue, I'm sure you're well aware, most parents in North Carolina don't have access to paid leave. 1 in 4 new moms is back at work less than 2 weeks after giving birth. That one always stops me in my tracks every single time. Only about 12% of North Carolina workers have access to paid family leave. And of course, due to systemic racism, there are huge disparities in who actually has access to that benefit. And we know that this impacts birth outcomes and child health, where we continue to see inequities. So paid leave is really, really critical for family bonding. It allows parents to find stable childcare. It improves child health and other outcomes, prevents child abuse and maltreatment. So despite all of this overwhelming evidence, there is still no national paid leave policy and no statewide paid leave policy. However, thanks to the incredible tenacious and persistent work of some of our Think Babies partners, including Moms Rising and Prevent Child Abuse and others, along with the work of dedicated community advocates. There are now 22 city and county governments that have extended paid leave benefits to their employees. So there's a wide range of benefits. You know, some are sort of that gold standard, fully paid 12 weeks family and medical leave. Some are 8 weeks paid parental leave. So there's a range, and that's, again, sort of the discretion and the beauty of local decisions. But all of it adds up to more families having the time that they need to be together. And these local efforts have really had a snowball effect. When we started the Think Babies work a few years ago, there were just a handful of cities and counties that were doing this. I can't remember exactly, but I want to say it was like maybe 7 or 8 places. And now it's at 22. So, you know, from one county to the next, it was like, well, I heard that they're doing this. Should we think about this? And we're losing employees to the next county over. And so, you know, that momentum has continued to grow. And the momentum that has built from the success is growing at the state level. We've had bills filed for paid family leave at the state level for the last 2 legislative sessions. So that is continuing to slowly move forward. And then, of course, at the federal level, you know, paid leave is now a centerpiece issue, part of the Build Back Better plan. And that simply would not have happened without the work of local advocates in states all over the country, including North Carolina. And so another way that we approach local advocacy at Think Babies is to provide micro grants to community partners across the state. So these grants are small, time-limited grants for local or regional efforts to build awareness, engage community members, increase advocacy skills, and connect with policymakers. So you can see all 21 of our community partners on this map, some of whom have been funded for multiple projects because they've now built ongoing Think Babies coalitions in their areas. And so I just want to call out one really project, and that is in Randolph County, led by the Randolph County Partnership for Children. So they've received several microgrants to do a variety of projects, ranging from community roundtables, which included local elected officials. They hosted one in every town within their county, which there's a lot of towns in Randolph County. And they've done family engagement work with a parent stakeholder council, and then they've done public awareness efforts. And so throughout each of these projects, they have really maintained a focus on lifting up the voices of community members, especially parents who are most impacted. And they have also engaged with local elected officials throughout the county. So their latest project was a video showcasing some of the childcare challenges facing Randolph County. And so they created this video and then they sent it to policymakers to engage them in more conversation about these topics with the parents. So I'm going to show that video now too, and hopefully not mess it up this time. Clearly, I'm off to a good start with that goal.
It's okay. Yes.
The health and growth of Randolph County's economy depends on a reliable, skilled workforce. Working parents need high-quality, affordable care. When quality child care is out of reach, there's a breakdown that costs businesses, taxpayers, and our state's economy nearly $3 billion annually in lost revenue, reduced output, and higher costs.
I left the workforce because daycare prices are too expensive. I had a son who was in daycare 12 days a month, and it was $400. That's not even full time.
It costs a business $3,000 annually for each employee who has to miss work or stop working because of the lack of reliable childcare. It costs the family wages and financial security.
There's just not enough high quality childcare in our area because of the kind of the availability. I struggled. I lost my job because of that.
Randolph County has high-quality childcare, but most providers are in Asheboro, Randleman, and Archdale, creating a childcare desert. The pandemic underscored the critical role childcare plays in our economy. It drew attention to the unlivable low pay plaguing early educators.
The Child Care Wages Program, it's important because it was designed to increase retention, education, and compensation for our early childhood providers.
I was a 2-year-old teacher in Randolph County. Every 6 months, my bills would be caught up. The wages program itself helps early child care professionals stay in early child care.
The Wages program is part of the solution. We have a strong foundation in Randolph County. Dedicated professionals and high-quality centers and homes paired with the support from Randolph Partnership for Children means our community can make the most of investments in early care and education.
At the Randolph County EDC, we work with employers. We want to make sure that the environment that those employers live and work in is suitable for their success. If the current employees don't have a quality place to leave their children, then we don't have a quality workforce.
It's imperative we invest in children from the start. Investing early means a positive impact on brain growth and development. Investing early means a 1 to 13 return on investment. Investing early means a stable workforce today and a skilled workforce tomorrow.
All right, so as you can see, that video just really tied together all of the different issues facing childcare in Randolph County and made it really local. So I just love that as an example of taking some of the same messages that we are using at the state level, but bringing it home to their own community. So now I'm going to talk about some ways that you can take action at the local level right now. And the first, which I'm sure you're well aware of, the American plan that was passed by Congress last spring to provide COVID funding. One big part of this plan was funding for state and local relief. And this includes about $5.7 billion just for North Carolina. And so that most of that funding has been awarded to cities and counties. And the funds can be used for really specific purposes as dictated by the feds. And so as you can see here, it's for supporting public health, addressing economic impacts, premium pay for essential workers, but addressing educational disparities and promoting healthy childhood environments. Those two things are specifically called out as allowable expenses. So with that in mind, here are just a few ways that this funding could be used to support early childhood issues. Counties or cities could adopt premium pay for essential workers, including childcare teachers. As you heard in those videos, this is a huge issue right now. That funding could be used to increase access to basic needs, such as diapers, emergency food, transportation assistance. It could be used to expand participation in home visiting, to provide paid family leave for essential workers. It could be used for communities to do more outreach about the child tax credit and make sure families can take advantage of that. So these are just a few ideas. They come from their recommendations from the Build Initiative. So that link is in the slide here. And I encourage you to check out all of it. There are a lot more ideas than just this. But the thing to keep in mind is that every city and county government is approaching this differently. I know some have created special committees to talk about how to spend this money. Some have done community surveys to get input. So, it's kind of the beauty of local advocacy is that I don't have the answer for you as like one way to go about doing this. But I do know that there is an opportunity to give input here. So, it's kind of up to all of you at this point to do a little investigating, reach out to your city council members, reach out to, your county commissioners, find out how much funding there is. If there's an opportunity to give input, maybe you can join a committee, as the Reverend spoke about earlier. So, find out what ways there are in your community to give input. But this is a huge opportunity for local advocacy around a very large amount of money that we can make sure some of it goes for children and families, in our areas. So another way you can take action right now is to speak up for every child's right to a sound basic education, beginning in early childhood. So This is the heart of the Leandro case that I mentioned earlier. And Every Child NC is a coalition of organizations and parents and teachers and students who are advocating for equity in education funding. And I am a member of this coalition and really excited about the work that we're doing at the state level, but also in communities. So the Leandro case is complicated. It deserves its own like hour-long presentation. But the bottom line is that the courts have ordered the state to fully fund and implement a plan that was developed by national, nonpartisan education experts. And the state now has a deadline of October 18th to comply with this court order. So that's just around the corner. While the Leandro case will be decided at the state level, there are still some things that you can do locally to make your voice heard. And Every Child NC has some tools to help you do this. So the first one is a template for a local resolution. So there's a template on the Every Child NC website that you can send to encourage your school board, your county commissioners to pass that resolution, affirming their commitment to the Leandro plan. I'm proud to say my school board here in Durham, where I live, passed the resolution calling for the plan to be fully implemented and funded. And then you can also dig deeper into well, we have a budget impact tool on the Every Child NC website, which I'm going to show you next. But it's a really amazing tool that was put together to help show how the Leandro plan would impact each individual district in the state. So this is a great way to build some awareness and excitement about what the Leandro plan is all about, but also it's an opportunity to give input on local spending, because ultimately it's going to be up to local districts to decide how to spend the money that they would receive in this plan. So here is a quick, not going to go through all this, don't worry. It's a really quick look at just what the budget tool looks like on the website. So there are two different versions. The one on the left is for early education, and this is just a few different indicators in the early education side. There are a lot more things included in the plan, the Leandro plan. This is just the ones that the data could easily be pulled for. And then on the right is K-12, which is obviously much broader than early ed. But essentially, once you select the county, so on the left here, I've selected Robeson County. It's going to show you the impact and amount of funding that your county would receive in each of these different areas if the Leandro plan is fully funded and implemented by 2028. So, let's look at just one line item here in Robeson County for Smart Start. So they currently receive about $2.8 million. If Leandro plan is fully funded, their fiscal year 2022 funding, so this upcoming year, would increase by about 14% to about $3.2 million. And by 2028, when the plan should be fully implemented, their Smart Start funding would increase 362% for a total of over $10 million. And again, that's just one piece of this puzzle. And that alone would make such a huge impact. So there is a large amount of data here, but it's a really incredibly useful tool to get a better sense of, first of all, just how inadequate education funding is, but also what the promise of the Leandro case is all about. So I really encourage you to take a look at this tool and dig into your own county and see, oh my gosh, like if Leandro was fully funded, we would have so much more money for teacher salaries or for early intervention and all these pieces that are so important. So another way that you can take action right now is one that certainly has been making some headlines these days, and that is about ensuring school safety during COVID. As I'm sure you're well aware, most COVID-19 safety measures are currently being decided at the local level. And so mask mandates, things like that are not being decided at the state level at this point. But you don't have to show up at a school board protest to make your voice heard. There are a lot of other ways to advocate for policies to keep children and their families and their educators safe. So our partners at NC Child have put together a really fantastic toolkit on local advocacy for COVID school safety. So this toolkit has sample messages, different strategies and ways to reach local officials. And then I've also added this here, but they have some additional local advocacy tools around the American Rescue Plan funding that we talked about earlier. So I encourage you to check out these tools on their website as well, and take some action today. So before I wrap up, I just want to encourage all of you to take one other really easy action, and that is to sign the Think Babies NC Pledge. It's a quick sign up form and a survey, so you can let us know how you want to be involved. That way we can make sure that you stay updated on the latest news and advocacy resources for babies and families. And then please also check out the coalition's website listed here to find resources that you can use in your local advocacy efforts. We are a statewide organization, so our action alerts and the bulk of our work is focused on state and federal efforts. And part of that is because every county and every city does things differently. But there are still a lot of useful advocacy tools that we have that you can use at the local level. From advocacy trainings to issue fact sheets, toolkits, message guidance, social media, local county data. These are all things that you can use in your own efforts locally. So with that, I will wrap up. I hope that you're all inspired to take some action right now and go be a strong local advocate. And if you take nothing else away from this, just remember that your voice is powerful and your story is powerful. And together, we can all make a really powerful impact for the children and families in our own local communities.
Wow. And you were scared to follow Reverend Dr. Clifford Barnes. You had a phenomenal message there. Thank you so much. Very impactful data, very impactful stories, and I love the videos. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. And I am going, before we go to break, we are going to circle back. We had a question that we want Reverend Dr. Clifford to be able to address while everybody is on. And so I'm going to go ahead and ask him. And thank you again, Elaine.
Yes, good job, Elaine. Great job.
Yes. Okay, so the question that we had in the question and answers is, can you share some examples of the policies City Council has influence over?
Okay, absolutely. Well, we have influence over what's built in the city. We have influence over what we call infrastructure. That means the streets and everything that happens under the streets. We have the influence over resources that come into the city and where those resources go. For example, here in Wilmington, we have a $242 million budget. So we have resources of everyone that's employed in Wilmington has to come through the city council. We govern that. We have influence over fire, the fire department, and the police department. So those are some of the things that we do. Recreation departments. We have influence over parks and, like I said, again, buildings, how you build the building, where you build that building. We call it the land development code. So we're doing all of that. Anything that's built in the city comes through the city council. Businesses and those things. Those are some of the things that we definitely have influence over. And how it relates to kids and families is you've got to make sure that you're putting the resources in neighborhoods that need those resources. So we have a thing called Rise Initiative, that the idea is to put money into the areas that need the resources. So we look at everything through an equity lens.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for answering that question. If anything else comes up, we will let you know. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to transition over into a 10-minute break. I told you guys when we started today, we had some phenomenal speakers, and so far they have not disappointed. They have, backed up my word. We will have some more phenomenal speakers after our break. We'll have the youth keynotes, 2 of them, and then we will finish up with our panel discussion. So we'll reconvene back here at 10:30. Thank you, Elaine and Reverend Dr. Clifford Barnett, Sr. We hope that you can stick around for the second half, but if not, we understand.
Okay, thank you much. Bye-bye.
So welcome back, everyone, from our 10-minute break. 10 minutes seems to fly. Now we're thrilled to be able to share with you the first, and yes, I did say the first, of today's Youth Voice keynote speech. The first one will be from Angela Casayoka. She is a senior in high school in Wake County and an advocate on NC Child's Youth Advocacy Council. As she is in school right now, she has shared her message today as a video. I will turn it over to Angela via video.
Hello, my name is Angela Casayoka and I'm a senior at Lees Road High School. I've involved myself in local advocacy because I believe there's always progress to be made in society. And I feel that as a young person, it's especially important that I try making a difference now so that I'm not burdened with the consequences of my inaction in the future. A lot of the work that I have done has been with NC Child, which is an organization seeking to improve the well-being of children and families in North Carolina. I've been a part of NC Child's Youth Advocacy Council for 3 years now, which consists of other teenagers in Wayne and Wake counties trying to remediate some of the issues facing our peers. Some of those issues include nicotine addiction, and we were actually invited to speak with representatives from the Attorney General's office to help them collect information about what was going on in school so they could use it in their case against Juul. Another one of the issues that we address in our Youth Advocacy Council is the lack of mental health resources in schools. And I myself was able to set up a roundtable discussion with other Youth Advocacy Council members, as well as representatives, county commissioners, and school board members to talk about how we could better support students this school year in light of the pandemic. Social media has also played a heavy role in my advocacy. I was actually a media intern for NC Child last summer, and with that opportunity, I made surveys tracking the social media habits of other youth that I knew and used that information to help them create Instagram posts for their voter engagement project. I've also, in my own life, my own personal life, I have used social media heavily to advocate for different organizations that are very important to me, especially Black Lives Matter. Using the story or post tools, it's very, very easy to spread information about the organizations and causes that you care deeply about. You can spread just general information to educate people about your cause, or you can use it to mobilize people to go to protests or to secure funds for bail or attorneys. But in conclusion, it's very important to get involved in whatever way that you can, because if you want to see positive change in your community, the only way to do that is if you fight for it yourself. So I hope that everybody watching here will be inspired and try and make a change in their community in whatever way that they can. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Angela. And our next Youth Voice keynote is again via video, and it's going to be from Prithika Rutnam. She is a junior in high school at North Carolina School of Science in Math, and she has advocated with North Carolina, Every Child NC.
Hello, my name is Prithika Rutnam and I am a junior currently studying at the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics. I am originally from Union County and I've lived in North Carolina almost my entire life. I moved here when I was 5, so that makes it 11 years, which is a long time for me. But the reason I'm here today is to discuss the inadequacies of learning disability programs in early child care programs across North Carolina. There are 4,419 preschools and early child care programs in the state of North Carolina. However, not a single one of these programs was able to support my brother. In 2018, my brother was diagnosed with autism and ADHD. In 2020, my brother was denied access to early child care education. Early child care programs that accommodated for my brother's needs were either too expensive or too far away. Programs that were accessible to my family's income status were not able to provide for my brother's autism and ADHD. My parents were faced with a decision no parent should ever face. Should I send my child to a school that doesn't accommodate for his needs? Or should I take away the opportunity entirely for my child to receive early education and care? I still remember the late nights my parents spent under the flickering kitchen lights, frustrated that they must come to a decision and upset that they had no control over their circumstance. Over the course of 1 year, my brother was asked to be removed from 3 separate preschools, all of which were unequipped to support and provide additional support for my brother's diagnosis. Finally, my parents were able to find a program that could accommodate for my brother's autism and ADHD. 1 month later, my parents were forced to pull him out of the program. It was too expensive. Of course, this is all just a blip in my brother's memory, but its impacts will be life-lasting. I am always faced with the question, why was I, as a child, the same age as my brother, allowed the opportunity to child care programs, but my brother was not? Why are his disabilities a deciding factor when it comes to whether or not he receives early childhood education? It just doesn't make sense. There are 73,689 children with specific learning disabilities in North Carolina, according to the National Center for Learning Disabilities. However, there are not enough schools that are equipped with providing for children with learning disabilities. And these numbers will only continue to grow as the population of North Carolina continues to rise. This makes it more crucial than ever to implement programs dedicated to accommodating for students with learning disabilities, so that every child in North Carolina has the same opportunity to learn, to grow, to thrive in today's society. Their disability should not be a deciding factor in whether or not they are given the same opportunity as every other child in North Carolina. All children deserve to learn regardless of their learning disabilities. All children deserve to learn in places they are comfortable in, they feel safe in, they feel that they can learn in. And that is what North Carolina needs to fix. That is what North Carolina needs to provide. So no other family has to go with my family and countless other families have gone through, have continued to go through. It's 2021. Children should not have to choose between learning, between education versus staying at home. All children deserve the opportunity to thrive, to grow. And it begins with early childcare. It begins today. Thank you so much for listening, and I really, really hope that in the future, no parent should ever have to go through this decision. No child ever has to miss out on the opportunities every child must receive. Thank you so much, and I hope all of you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela and Prithika. Those were awesome messages, very powerful, very inspiring, and they are both, as I can tell, wise beyond their years. So glad we have them as advocates for North Carolina. At this time, we're going to be transitioning into our panel discussion. Before I do that, I wanted to remind our panelists as you come on to, for interpretation services, please ensure that you do not speak too fast, that you're speaking slowly. I know that sometimes we get excited. I do it. I get excited and I start talking very fast. So as we ask you questions, please remember that their interpreters are trying to interpret for participants to try to speak slowly. Today's panelists include Kristen Dunn, a Laurel Park Town Commissioner and Operations Director at Thrive, Pilar Rocha Goldberg, President and CEO of El Centro Hispano, and Crystal Kelly, Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Children's Council of Watauga County. Today, both Malia Rose Waters and I, Amelia Rose Waters, Policy Director at Prevent Child Abuse North Carolina, and I will be moderating today's panel. Our questions are based off of input that we received from you guys, from all the participants, and even those that haven't been able to participate today. We may not be able to answer all of them live, depending on our time. But if the panelists are okay, we will be sharing their email addresses so that you can reach out to them and ask them your questions if you would like. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Do we have everybody on video? I want to make sure. I can only see. Yes, we do. Hello, Pilar, Kristen, and Crystal. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today. The first question right out the gate is pretty painless. Briefly, in 1 minute, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got involved in local advocacy? And does anyone want to go first, or do you want me to call on someone? Pilar, I couldn't hear you because you were muted.
No, I was saying you can call, but then I guess I can start.
Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm Pilar Roche Goldberg, the president and CEO of El Centro Hispano. I'm very excited to be here and thank you for the invitation. At El Centro, we work to strengthening the community and building bridges and advocating for equity and inclusion for our community, mainly in the Triangle area. And we believe that we need to be part of the solution when we see some issues. And it's why I decided when I came, I'm from Colombia. I came 17 years ago to work at Duke as a nutritionist. That's my training. And when I started learning more about what our immigrant community have to go through, I decided to be part of the solution and be proactive and work on that instead of just looking and being an a person looking from the outside. So it's how I decided to do more advocacy and work with our community and for the community.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pilar. And thank you for going first. Kristen, you are next on my screen. Do you want to go?
Sure, and remind me to talk slowly. Thanks for having us here today. So my name is Kristen Dunn, and if the real question is like, what do you do now and how did you get there? So I'm currently the operations director at a local nonprofit called Thrive. And our biggest, newest endeavor is ending homelessness in our community in four counties over here, managing those HUD contracts. But how I began was when I was in college at App State. I didn't have Friday classes my sophomore year, and my mother said, maybe you should bake cookies for nursing homes. And I said, I don't bake, and I don't want to go to a nursing home. So with my free time, I called up the local homeless shelter. And that really, really got me involved in my community to the point now where I've served, like you've said, in government and in other ways as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for being here with us today. And the last one we have is Crystal.
Hello. Yes, thank you again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thanks again for having us. Chris and I also went to App State, so we have that in common. And my background was a social worker, worked direct practice for many, many years, and essentially got really frustrated with the systems and just saw the need for them to change more than the families and the children who were having to access them. And so over the years, I worked to go back to school and get experience to get more into a leadership role, and was able to work with the Children's Council, which is our local Smart Start organization here in Watauga County, for the last 11 or 12 years. And now my role is the Director of Strategic Initiatives, which basically means I do a lot of community planning and convening around children's issues and how that's linked to some of the state work and policy that's happening. We run a local initiative, co-lead one for trauma and resilience, and really just understand from being boots on the ground the need for lots of things to change, and for all of us to be aligned in that work. So thanks again for having us here.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Thank you. I can't wait to hear from each of you. You sound like you have been doing some local work. I'm going to turn it over to Malia to start with the first question.
Hi, everyone. Kristen, my first question is for you. You talked about this a little bit in your introduction. You have an extensive career working directly with families that are in crisis or in need of additional supports. You've worked with youth leadership development, with homeless individuals, survivors of domestic violence, and currently you're the operations director for an organization that works with adults with mental illness. We have many people across the state that are attending this institute today that work directly with families in similar roles. How would you recommend that they advocate on the local level for the children and families that they work with? Oftentimes, when we're working directly with families, I remember when I was working directly with families, I didn't sometimes think that I had a role in advocating. So I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more.
That's a big question. Thanks, Malia. Well, one thing that I was, I guess, really fortunate to happen upon, and I'll put in a plug here, and I'm not sure if y'all put in this plug. I was at the dentist this morning, so I didn't see the first part, was that I met a mentor years ago, and she recommended that I look at a website that has a Facebook group called Nonprofit Happy Hour. And Nonprofit Happy Hour is a pretty life-changing place to be. It's big, it's messy, it's uncomfortable, but it talks about things like an abundance mindset. And I never in my years heard a nonprofit talk about anything except for scarcity. So I'm done talking about scarcity. And instead I'm talking about the things that we can do to be more abundant, which really for me also started including our staff members, to make sure that workers also didn't feel this scarcity mindset. That would be the first big thing that I would say. The second is that all of us in our capacities have the ability to be very reactive. But I do bring up to local leaders who I partner with, I say we would really, really get to make a choice right now to be proactive or to be reactive. And I wiggle my way into all kinds of conversations people don't want to have by using some of these big picture leadership thinking, instead of saying, well, we can be the last ones to do such a thing, or we could be the first ones to do such a thing. And sometimes it works.
I love that. It's Nonprofit Happy Hour. Is that what it? And I love that you've started out with talking about having this abundance mindset and kind of getting rid of the scarcity mindset. I think that's really important when it comes to advocacy as well. So, Stacy, I will go to you for the next question.
All right, thank you. All right, Pilar, my question is for you. A few years ago, you initiated a shift in the strategic plan and mission for your organization, El Centro Hispano. I hope I'm saying that right. To focus on advocacy. So El Centro is now involved in advocacy in a number of different ways, with groups focused on LGBTQ+, Latinx, advocacy, youth advocacy, and community education and mobilization. Can you tell us about what led you to make this change and how El Centro has been involved in advocacy, like locally?
Yes, thank you. El Centro, next year we will be 30 years working in the community. We started in Durham, and we've been always very well known for the services to the community in our different programs. But we were finding some blocks and barriers for those services. And I always say, I believe we advocate every day for our community when we talk about, trying to have more bilingual staff in other organizations, stakeholders. But then we decided that really service and advocacy, changing systems and policies need to go hand by hand, because it's the only way you can really improve the services and accomplish our mission. Yes. So we decided to be more proactive on that and more intentional on that. So we restructured our organization and decided to have a department dedicated to advocacy with the groups we were working with. And then we started collaborating with other coalitions, being part of other groups. And so to learn more about it and also to see how we could do this work. And of course, getting to know our local government and also our state legislators and start having conversations with them about the issues our community faces, but also more putting like a human face to the issues. So bringing the stories and bringing our own groups, our own community we were working with to talk to them. So in that way, they will see these, all the policies and systems, how they can affect our community directly, yes, a person and human being. So yeah, that's what we've been doing. And when we decided to change and to be more intentional, I think, about the advocacy.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. So to be kind of create partnerships, but also educate and advocate at the same time locally. Awesome. Thank you so much. Malia, I'm gonna turn it over to you for the next one.
Yeah, I'm hearing a little bit of a theme here with direct practice, working directly with families, and also advocacy being a key part of that. So, Crystal, my next question is for you. Elevate Watauga is an initiative born from the work of the Prenatal to 3 stakeholder group. This cross-sector group has been meeting since late 2018 to develop and refine an action plan for Watauga County with the primary goal of advancing promising policies and programs that ensure that every parent has the support they need to give their children a strong start in life. Tell us a little bit about your work with Elevate Watauga.
Yeah, so it's fun to think back onto how things began because it now is just part of how things are. But in early 2018, we actually received a small planning grant from the National Association of Counties. They were working closely with the Pritzker Foundation on their strategy to build out community and state level strategies for increasing supports for prenatal to 3. So basically we got this tiny little grant, and because we got that grant, we had to engage with our county leaders. They actually had to sign off on it. So from the beginning, they were signed into, yeah, we're part of this process. And this group came together really with an intention of exactly what you're saying, Kristen, like the abundance mindset. What is possible for children and families in our county? How can we create a vision that we can all get behind instead of the, we all know what the barriers are. We don't need to spend too much time talking about them. So that group really was able to be in a space that envisioned what is possible. What would it look like if all children and families were supported from birth? What would that mean? And we did a landscape study that really looked at community assets and strengths, and then also identified gaps. And we're able to see that, we had some work to do. So I've led that coalition or stakeholder group for the past few years, and Elevate Watauga came out of that. So we were basically we need a name. We shouldn't just be this group of people that are meeting all the time. It's very cross-sector. So it's business leaders and, county commissioners, and as well as direct practice people. There's parents engaged. We meet about quarterly. So, there's a lot more to be said about that, but it's a passionate group of people that continue to hold that torch of what is possible versus we can't do that.
I have a quick follow-up for you. 2 weeks ago, our institute was on collaboration and coalition building. And, you talked about the relationships and how important they are as part of this coalition. How are you able to bring such a diverse group of stakeholders to the table for Elevate Watauga?
I think we were uniquely positioned for a few different reasons. I had served as the executive director for the Children's Council for close to 7 years prior to beginning this process. And so I had some of those relationships already established. I was able to leverage some additional ones. It helped that the funding came from the National Association of Counties, because that by default engaged our county commissioners in the work and our county manager. And then, individual relationship building on that one-on-one, identifying both the grass tops and the grassroots, right? So the people who are in positions where they can make change happen. So whether that be school board members or town council members or people like that, but then also people with lived experience. So we wanted to make sure that practitioners and or parents' voices were heard. But it took time. I mean, it takes time to build coalitions that are authentic. And those getting the messaging, I think, especially with early childhood, so much of our work is in sharing the research, because most people just don't know that the brain science is really hard to argue with. And so spending time and educating and sharing the information, and then eventually you build champions from within.
Excellent. So relationships. Yes. All right, Stacy, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, so my next question is for Kristen. So you were instrumental in the town of Laurel Park and passing a paid leave policy for employees. Can you kind of explain to us or tell us what drew you to that issue and kind of walk us through the process of advocating for its passage?
Well, this has been my favorite topic for years, paid parental leave. Don't know if anyone else's favorite topic is this. And so I'll say again that I was fortunate to hear from the leaders over at the nonprofit Happy Hour. Somebody linked, the website is called nonprofitaf.com. And when I was expecting my daughter in 2018, I was the executive director of an agency that had no paid leave for new parents. And we also, I think the vice president of the board looked at me and said, "We don't pay your short-term disability." I said, "You don't pay my short-term disability." And she said, "If you go on leave for 12 weeks, you need to be," and she worked through it because she was a banker and the banks have paid leave. And they looked around the rest of the boardroom and they said, "A lot of businesses are offering something." And I said, "In fact, a lot of nonprofits must, and even governments are." So we passed our first paid leave with my support when I was like 34 weeks pregnant. So for anyone to think that it's going to be like this, it's not. And then by 2019, am I right? 2020, the pandemic has me off. But when I was appointed at Laurel Park Town Council, I said my first order of business will be something that is highly relevant, speaking with the other members of council based on their own value system. So nobody else was my age. Nobody else had small children in their home. But I started pointing out the concept of employee retention. And retention got their ear because that's something that really mattered to them. Our town manager is my age. Our finance officer is a year older than I am. And so for me to say, maybe you guys don't understand this, but our employees do. And I will just say the other thing that was very interesting was that the mayor of Laurel Park, when I called him to present that we need to pay our folks when they have either small children or if they're adopting or if they have their own medical issues, his response to me was, "Well, Kristen, we already follow all of the laws." So when you do start talking with folks, you have to present at a baseline of having no concept of what the laws state. And I expressed to all of them that the laws have been the same since my youngest brother was born. you know, he's a homeowner now. Those laws have not changed since 1993 and 1994 federally. And they said, well, we follow all laws. And I said, you're cutting people's paychecks in their time of crisis, whether they have a medical crisis or whether they have a new child, you're cutting their paychecks. And I will say also, and then I will shut up, the city of Hendersonville was able to pass theirs after Laurel Park did, because we were proactive. They were able to be reactive next door to us.
Awesome. I have one kind of follow up, because you kind of touched on a couple of them. Was if you, of course, faced any barriers, and you spoke earlier about how the process was long, so that was a barrier, and you talked about, you know, kind of educating them on how you know, the laws haven't changed in a while. Were there any other barriers that you had, and if so, like, how did you overcome them? What did you do?
I would say if you're not anxious after you leave, you might not be doing it well. that one of the simplest things when we all are advocating for children and family is we know that it doesn't matter very much to others. So they could say, as they did when I was expecting, can we put it off till next month? Can we put it off till next month? Can we put it off till next month? And I don't think that that's because directors or elected officials don't care. But I think y'all are going to ask us later about prioritization. And so to keep saying this matters, it's really unsettling for me as a feeler, except for thinking about someone who is maybe making $12 or $14 an hour, who does, you know, have an accident and can't earn that paycheck. And I just have to keep thinking about who this is going to affect in the long run. So those barriers are really that it's not urgent for anyone except for us.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kristen. Malia, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, and I want to highlight too, one thing that Kristen talked about was that she knew who her audience was and where to go with that information. That you said that, you know, they didn't have young children, and so you needed to talk to them instead about retention and employee benefits in that way. So I just wanted to highlight that it's important that we know our audience, right? Like when we're going to advocate, and we change strategies based on who the audience is. So thank you. All right, Pilar. El Centro Hispano is a vital lifeline for the growing Hispanic/Latino population in the Triangle area. With programs focused in education, economic development, health and well-being, and community engagement and advocacy, the organization provides much needed support to the region's residents, while also engaged in leadership development and building coalitions of power. So how has your work changed over the past year and a half in response to the COVID-19 pandemic? And this could be in advocacy, or how you're shifting the delivery of programs as well.
Thank you. Really, El Centro has changed so much in this pandemic, and I think for the better somehow. At the beginning, of course, was thinking about how we can maintain our services to the community. We had to go through virtual classes and all the services, the support groups. Also, you know, teaching our community members how to upload some of the apps and to be able to, you know, participate in different things, the children in school anyway. But one of the main things we had to change was one of the services we've never did directly was food, but that was the first thing the community members started calling us on March 13. I remember I have, you know, somebody called me, said, I have 5 families who don't have anything to eat. What can we do? And the food banks couldn't get to our community because they didn't have volunteers, or also the food they have wasn't cultural relevant for our community members. So they weren't getting the food. Anyway, so we decided to be flexible, to adapt And then we started giving food, partnering with other farm workers and bringing food. So that was one of the pieces we had to change. But also in the advocacy piece, I think it was a good moment from a bad experience, because as you may know, our community was hitting the worst with the pandemic. Even though we were like, specifically in Durham, we are 14% of the population, and at some point we were 90% of the cases. So everybody was alarmed, and local government, state government started talking to us, what is happening, how can you help us? So it was a great moment for us to highlight the disparities that we know exist for a long time, but for them somehow was kind of new. And what could we do? So we started working in highlighting this, but also what you need to do. You need to acknowledge, lack of healthcare, how difficult is the system to navigate for our community. Communications, you need to have everything in Spanish and cultural relevant, cultural appropriate, so the community members can understand this. That is crazy for everybody. Yes, it wasn't only for our community, but then in another language that you don't understand. How paid sick time is not for our community. We were first line workers, all of these issues. So we were able to really come to local and state governments and say, we need to work on this, not only for right now, but we need to look at how are we going to back, not to normal, but to a better place where really our community has a place and is more systems and everything will be more equitable. So our voice was highlighted. I can't find the word I want to say, I'm sorry, but it has been a really good time for us, because now everybody's listening more to us about what is going on with the community and what do we need to do to change this. So the next time something similar happens, we are not in the same situation as we are right now. So, and we continue working on that. And the other good thing for us was we were able to, again, bring back the concept of community health workers or promotores de salud, and talk to, again, local and state governments, saying it is better to have people from the community talking to the community. Yes, so is my neighbor, is my friend, is my aunt, is my nephew, and it's not another person or organization telling me what is going on or what do I have to do or where the services are, but is, somebody who is close to me. So we were able to revamp that at the state level and at the local level, and we were able to hire people from the community and train them as community health workers, and that work has been continuing, very important even now, because again, we are again in this place, but also about talking about recovery. How are we going to recover, and the importance to, again, have our community in mind, not only when it's a crisis. So yes, our work changed a lot, I think, even though it was a crisis and everything, but changed for the better. And we think we need to continue this momentum for our community.
And I want to add that El Centro is a trusted resource in the community, and that whenever you're promoting materials and whatnot, people look to you. They're trusting the resources that you have available. And I notice on your website that has a ton of resources, but one of the things on there is some videos that are in Spanish about COVID-19, about the 3 W's and all of that. So I just wanted to mention that for everyone that's on the Institute today, that El Centro has a lot of resources available that you could share as well. So just wanted to mention that. Thank you. And Stacy?
All right, Crystal. My question for you is, so Elevate Watauga has been able to maintain buy-in from leadership and the private sector. For advocates who would like to build relationships within their community, what would you recommend that they do to do that? Or how do they start?
That's a really great question. I think, having something that you're passionate about helps, because that comes across when you're talking with folks. Also, just a shared vision. So it goes back to, again, what Kristen was saying about the scarcity mindset. And oftentimes, especially in the nonprofit sector, there's this belief that you're competing for resources. And a lot of times, the things that we all want the same things. And so getting aligned on what that vision can look like. As far as how to build relationships, I think some of that is time. Some of it is finding the people who have the whose position you can leverage, right? So for example, one of my huge advocates, someone I can text at any time, is the chamber president. And he has, he believes the story, right? He believes that this is something that's needed for many reasons, both from a value point of view, but also from an economic standpoint. And so I can sometimes use him to bridge a relationship. So looking around at who your current people are in your court, and then who are they connected to that can also get engaged in the work. I think it's also, especially from an early childhood lens, really important to think of unusual suspects, because oftentimes we have the same people kind of in the room. And it's okay to be challenged, and it's okay to have some of the naysayers there. But if you maintain that core belief that it actually is possible, in my experience, it does bring people along, because I think there's something about the human spirit that knows that that is true, even though a lot of our structures and systems say that it's not. I guess lastly is you can go to where those people are. So, I showed up to county commissioner meetings a lot and tried and got on their agenda, or, go to business meetings, or bring a breakfast, host a lunch. Just kind of put yourself out there. And then over time, it only takes a few people to really latch on and really get what you're saying. And then they themselves will often become in a leadership role. So it doesn't just fall to you.
Right. You don't want to be the only one. I think someone spoke about that earlier. One is good, but numbers are also better, and having that support, and not feeling like you're the only one. So building on that, so people can do this by building on their partnerships, taking those partnerships and expanding them to the people that they know, and then taking of opportunities that are out there, such as the commissioners meetings and stuff like that, and then creating opportunities for you to deliver your message and educate, build those partnerships.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal. Malia?
So my next question is going to be for all of you, and I'll start with Kristen first. There are many different strategies that we can use to make progress on policy change and advocacy. Elaine had talked about some of those strategies. We can letter to the editor, we can call, we can mail, we can email, we can speak out at meetings. I'd like to hear from each of you. How do you think of the role of local advocates in changing policies? And Kristen, I'll start with you. You probably hear from a lot of local advocates.
All right, I'm repeating the question here. So the role of local advocates, I guess I could say that there is probably nothing more powerful than if you do have local advocates who are joining, whether it's for or against something. But one example was a Laurel Park meeting that we had. It was about 6 weeks ago, and we had 17 people come to speak against something. One spoke in favor of, but our role was to listen and take notes for every single person who came out to speak about their concerns. And by the end of that meeting, we wanted to assure folks that we were not going to go through with the initial plan. It was not about children, it was not about families, but it was about what the shape of the community would look like. So I could say that there is probably nothing more important than showing up. And if you are like many of us here, I think, working and can't show up, I will let you know that for us, we had somebody read every email out loud every mailed letter out loud. And that was phenomenal to show that every person had an equal voice.
Excellent. Crystal, what do you think are the roles of local advocates in
Yeah, I
changing
think
and influencing policy? Sorry, go
I
ahead.
think that's a really good question. And it can be, I think of it in almost like this two-tiered, like it can be to bring light to something that needs to be changed. Similar, what she's talking about is that was against something, but it can where maybe there's many people who think that, but unless there's like a showing of mass grouping, that it may not move. But I think the other, and I'd be interested to hear, from Kristen's perspective, if this is true, it can sometimes give cover for our leaders to know that there is public will, right? So local advocates and showing like, this is important to us. If you are going to make some kind of very big funding decision or something like that, and you can put your neck on the line, right? If you're going to do something like raise property taxes or something that can be controversial, but if there's enough people that are really showing up and advocating for that, I think it can give that cover to allow them to feel confident in that decision.
Thank you. Excellent. Pilar, what do you think are what's the main role, or what are some of the roles of local advocates in influencing policy?
Yeah, I think as I see it is, being the voice of the community or the people we work with or we serve. So always listening and looking at what are the needs, the barriers, the issues the community faces, and then learn also about what is happening, the resources, participating in roundtables, in other groups, going to, because that's how we've been doing it at El Centro. Yes, it's not only saying, oh, these are our issues, but it's also, being at the table so we can see how we can really be the bridge. Yes, see, okay, these are these resources. What really can we do to change these? And then, as I think Crystal mentioned a lot, the relationships, and then really going and talking to people and letting people know. And not only bringing those issues, but also I believe in bringing some perspectives, how we can change that. Yes, so it's not only putting it on the table, but this is the way we see we can change this. So I think that's also important, and how we've been doing the work.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I love because you all three gave different perspectives and answers, and I really appreciate that. I wanted to hear a little bit about all three of your perspectives, and just want to reiterate, being able to be the voice for others and being able to lift up the voices of others, really important. Also, knowing that your voice can be heard even if you can't be present, like knowing that you can send in an email and that it will be shared at the meeting. And then also being able to, I love, Crystal, how you talked about, the coverage, right? Where if you have a lot of people that are coming in and saying, yes, we really want to see this happen, that it builds that political will as well. So thank you all so much. Stacy.
So in closing, this will be our last question for the panel. What advice would you give to advocates for children, youth, and families who would like to get involved in local advocacy? And this time we'll start with Crystal.
I guess, honestly, I just think it's such a long game that going in with understanding that is very, very important, because it can be exhausting and brutal to not see things move when you know that that's what's needed for both, for children and families to thrive. We know that this is what's needed, and yet, day after day, we're not having it. It's not seeing it. So lots and lots of self-care, understanding that, this is a marathon. I think that's been said before, that it's not on your shoulders to fix, that you have to have others around you to support that. And then really just, there's not a lot of local groups. And so you may be leading that. And I think the more that we share what our passions are, especially in community work, you will find people around you who feel the same way. And that there's not, some special roadmap to follow. It really can start just by having conversations in a coffee shop and then expanding that out a little bit more. It doesn't need to be a formal, we don't need an advocacy pin to do this work. I think, the main thing is just that it's the long haul and it's exhausting, and to know that and to do things that refill yourself so that you can stay engaged.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Crystal. Pilar?
Yes, no, I think you touched, really good, important points. And I emphasize always listening to the community. I think that's very, very important. Involving the people you serve or you want to advocate for, I think is also very important. And as Crystal said, we don't have to do this alone, and we don't have to do it all. So looking for collaborations, relationships, partnerships, so we can be more effective. But again, it's not an easy road, but I think it's very important. It's what we learned, and I personally learned a few years ago, that we really needed to do this work. But again, not alone, and not everything, but we can collaborate and have those relationships so we can be more effective.
Thank you so much, Pilar. And Kristen.
I'm just taking notes on what the other panelists have said. So I feel like, Pilar, you talked about building bridges, for example, earlier. And I would say that there comes the point where I said, if you're not anxious, or Crystal, if you're not exhausted, sometimes there is the point where that bridge is not the one to continue pursuing. And so that, I think, would just be a good bit of advice to getting involved, but don't bark up the wrong tree for too long, when really you can start going in a different direction and reaching out to someone different. And then I had heard, this made me laugh, that there are two ways that people end up in local government. And I could think that for board service, sometimes even nonprofit leadership. It's either if you're mad or if you're asked. So as you are advocating, if you can nudge someone else who would be another good advocate, for example, building a board of directors, if you're on a board, and for you to say, well, I can bring in somebody like-minded, and 3 years down the line, Crystal says it takes time, 3 years down the line, you have created this new board culture, or this new culture at your agency, by inviting the right people to join your staff. And that is how things can then get done, instead of having people join who are angry about stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I want to thank all three of you for being here and sharing your expertise with us, what it is you've done locally. And, we heard a lot today from you three in different ways, different messages, but it was pretty much, the messages were, listen to your community, create opportunities for partnerships or just having events. Self-care is important, and patience. And then that there are power in numbers. You don't want to be alone. That's also part of self-care, not carrying that load on your shoulders yourself. And then know your audience and grow those partnerships and enable those partnerships to work in your favor. So we totally appreciate all you guys' time and expertise today. And if you guys will, if you haven't and you would like to share your email address so that other participants can maybe ask some questions if they have any additional questions. But thank you so much for being here today. So we have saved a few minutes here at the end. so that you guys have a chance to complete today's evaluation. We will share the link on the slide shortly, and we really appreciate your feedback. All the feedback is reviewed by the planning team, and all the comments and information is taken to make these better. So please take these last few minutes, if you can, to complete the survey. We will be sharing a recording of today's event soon to you via email. And there will also be an opportunity to have a certificate of participation. So please reach out to Carly Whittick at cwhittick@preventchildabusenc.org. They will put her information in the chat if you would like to request that certificate. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you guys at our next institute on Tuesday, October 5th. Remember, if you're not registered for the last two, you do have to register individually for each of them in order to participate. We will have some, again, phenomenal speakers and panelists for those last two also. Thank you so much.